Welcome to Communicate, a conversation for the collective just relate. My name's Talk, and the ego is listening. This is about the beers and bread and baby. Welcome to Communicate, a conversation for the collective just relate. Welcome to Communicate.
Hi, welcome to Communicate. Today is Thursday, April 27, 2023, and there's a ton going on in the world stage that has our attention. But before we can address these pressing issues of today's reality, I still feel like there's a lot unsaid about what's been going on and the events that have transpired since January of 2020. I figured this is a perfect time to kind of sit and review before we move on and address the pressing issues that are facing us as a country today. Let's start back with 2020. First, I think it showed us that our health not only connects us, controls us, and it can comfort us. Our health connects us. Looking over these last 3 years, which have been extremely divided in nature, we all have in common what we went through in the shared experience of January 2020 and the events that followed. Lockdown, the quarantine, dramatic isolation, testing, the requirements, the list goes on and on. We all, however divided we may be, shared in on the one common thing. We're divided, yet we were united. We were separated, yet we were joined. We were silenced, yet we were uniformly there, in that we all experienced 2020 together and saw what it has done to our systems around us and the world that we live in. Learned that our health is in danger, our very lives, and we don't have any other resource to look towards. We look towards the government. This is an example of what happened when the pandemic hit. We immediately sought these expert sources. Even myself in healthcare, we look towards our authoritative bodies like the CDC and the WHO to provide us guidance on kind of how to respond, which is typical in our practice. When we were faced with potential threat to our lives, most of us turned and faced and watched the government take stand and try to lead the way, leading to the political unravel that started with Trump, continues with Biden, we'll likely see in whoever's to follow in this 2024 campaign. Here's the real key piece to all that information, and that is, whenever our health was threatened, whenever our lives were on the line, we looked towards the government. The government provided their guidance, and thus the government was provided power. Power to issue rules, power to start policies, power to give us the guidance that we so desperately sought from a higher authoritative power. This is actually exactly how our government works. The government is given the powers that are balanced between the three executive branches of government, the three branches of government. These checks and balances also comes us the people. There's a real cool stipulation in our Constitution that says that the power of the government is only granted solely by the people who allow it. Now, does it say that verbatim? No. Wherever our toes meet the toes of the other lines of power is where the government's power is limited. So if we seek out government expertise during the pandemic, we are allowing them the powers, the control, and the constitutional ability to make laws and decisions and policies in according to what they consider the public's best interest. This is the standard format of a republican and a democracy, and our country has been emulated on that. However, it's really brought up a very interesting concept here, given that our government failed in some aspects to provide that adequate response that we sought out. What am I talking about? Well, myself included, with all of the other healthcare professionals out there, when this tragedy struck, we looked out for our authoritative bodies. These are our governing bodies that are the voices of authority or expertise when us professionals need someone to refer to, are being seen by a doctor. You want them to have the exact best answer for sure and not have to research every single thing. So the CDC and the WHO in the past have kind of served as these authoritative bodies that have collectively given a consensus or a guidance statement on different disease processes, provide us with a guidance statement or authoritative list of rules that says the summation of the literature review shows that blank is the best practice to do. That means that these experts here at CDC, WHO, or whatever the governing non-governmenting organizational body may be, those key three-letter words there, they really kind of dictate where the gaps in literature or where, a disagreement between two providers may occur. It provides, all said and done, with a finite list of rules and best practices that are accepted by all healthcare professionals as the highest quality to provide. So when 2020 happened, and I saw CDC cave and change their public guidance based off of political or monetary influence, let's just say my world shattered. I've always been pretty disappointed in our healthcare delivery and the lack of healthcare reform in our clearly inadequate system. However, I was naive and hoped for the best. But when I saw this monetary or outside influence of a expertise statement and guidance for the public, it really shook me. I realized that we can't necessarily rely on these governing bodies. And that was an interesting dynamic that brought up with this pandemic, because here we are, not only as a health profession, but as a public and a society looking toward the government towards guidance. And what do we get met with? We get met with half beneficiary guidance that ultimately does not serve to the health of humanity and to the general population, but ultimately serves to the government itself and any profitable, industrial corporate associations that they may have. Health disclosures and financial disclosures, as well as any conflicts of interest, have almost been disregarded since 2020. If you look at half of the evidence that we see now about any of the vaccine, any of this drug coming to industry research that we have available to us, if you take a look at the conflict of interest, it's pretty unbelievable, the financial disclosures. Most of our artists or authors, and our private investigators have direct financial obligations, sponsors, affiliations with pharmaceutical companies that are directly profiting from the research coming from those studies. Paul's always said this one thing, and he said, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And I think that's kind of exactly where we lay when it comes to information and, let's say, misinformation during our time. That's a little bit about government and their control during the pandemic. We were all connected, although it may have been a time marked by, division and separation and hate between different groups of humanity. Ultimately, the one thing that connected us the most was that fear of losing our life. It was that fear of ceasing to live. It was a fear of being threatened to exist. And therefore, human existence itself is what connects humanity. It's a very, very important point. As we look in a time right now where we are being threatened by outside entities, our national security is being threatened, our nuclear safety is jeopardized. We have all of these different forces outside of our country that are working together and collaborating and honestly coming to bring down America, which once stood as a very great country that was on the forefront of what it meant to be independent and free from government. Now, it's not quite the same. Facing all of this outside retribution and consequences, we can't even get our shit together on the inside. Look at our domestic issues. We are so pinned up against one another right now that we couldn't unite in the name of our country, for anything. How can people unite when they are divided by the left or the right, or by pro-life or pro-choice? If they feel as if we need academic reform or not, or support this bill or not. How can we move on as one unified nation, the United States of America, if we are so divided by our different groups? About these groups. Big in the media right now, some key issues that we have going on: abortion. We've got pro-life, pro-choice, and a battle between, judicial power, where we have governments in Texas making law to ban access to certain medications. Now that is a state mandated policy that has, federal implications. Moving on from just abortion itself and the numerous medications and ethical issues that are associated with that, we have gun violence. We're all hearing in the media and seeing and experiencing, witnessing how gun violence is upticking in our community. And a lot of the different political representatives want to crack down here, crack down there, all in the name of public safety. Also have a proliferation of industry or pharmaceutical companies. We have acknowledged side effects of the vaccine, such as myocarditis in the young males, specifically after the second shot of the Pfizer vaccine, out of proportion than what should have been. And it is still not completely addressed or talked about by the CDC, addressing different side effects of the medication. And still, we have a campaign that is adamant about vaccinating and continuing with the vaccination plans. So now have a report of tinnitus. Tinnitus is being associated with the COVID vaccine, post-vaccination sequelae that's being reported. However, CDC has said that it has nothing to do with the vaccine itself and that it is not related to the health body. And as a leader in our research and discovery and this very novel experience that we're all having, how do they have such proof to be speaking so authoritarian? The literature isn't there. And the literature that is there is difficult to find. Even as a healthcare provider with different access to databases for research and data review, limited by institution, by school affiliation, and by kind of medical association. So the data available to the general public for interpretation is just not there. What do we have speaking for the public? We have these overheads like CDC and WHO who feel as if it's okay to just give statements as if it's not associated, or, it continues to be the best recommendation to do A or B. Yet we do not have the list of supporting literature and evidence to support it. Healthcare is supposed to be just that, evidence-based research. What is the point of doing research if you don't utilize it to optimize patient care and better execute the things that we're doing now? Good question, huh? We also have this fentanyl crisis that has gone, just completely out of hand, that now, we're touting and asking public users of Narcan to come off of their price a little bit and make it, I think it's now available over the counter as opposed to prescription only as a life-saving medication. Public health measure itself, you would think our community would be trying to take a lot more unfinanced, non-profitable approaches to fixing this epidemic that is leading to further teen suicides, accidental overdoses. In 2021 itself, it was outrageous the number of overdoses reported, and especially in young teens. This has been devastating for our younger population as well as our older population that sits isolated and, so far withdrawn from society or from a feeling of kind of belonging. I know I might have mentioned, the gun laws. We've got rampant gun violence, and we have all of these mandates coming out, all of these rules, and all of these debates that are happening when you turn on your TV. Just tune in and watch. But all of these debates are happening in the name of public safety. Our civil liberties, meaning what is right for ourselves as individuals, as patients, as citizens, as sovereign people, humans. What is right for us there in comparison to what's done for the name of the good? Public safety. We saw vaccine mandates as one example of what can happen when a government system makes a decision, a public policy decision that is supposed to be for the good of the public and may jeopardize civil liberties. And really, that has been the theme of everything that we've been seeing here over the last 2 to 3 years. It's been this continuous push back and forth between our civil liberties and public safety. Let's skip public safety. Let's take it a step further and say public health. Because in reality, public safety is public health. We're trying to optimize, protect, and prevent disease or dysfunction to the body and to the human as a functioning system. Public health, safety measures versus civil liberties, human rights movements. This is where it gets interesting. Because again, if you recall what I said in the beginning, it was the threat of our health that kind of drew us all together as a human body. But it was the seeking of guidance from the government that granted them the power to dictate public safety measures. And yet, it is that same system, the healthcare system, provided by the government, demanded by the people, that protects the sanctity of life and liberty. That was an ultimate priority. We all know who the warriors were at that time. We all know the people that have for many years stood behind the sidelines. For too many years, they've stood behind every thank you. The assumption of gratitude or responsibility for the well-being of another. Talking about the nurse. 2020 was granted to be the year of the nurse. Gallup poll every year, 25 years except for 2001, have voted nursing the most trusted profession out of all of them. In 2001, it fell second to firefighters, given the events of September 11th. But nurses are the most trusted profession that we have. During the time when we are all terrified for the sake of our health, fearing that our lives are in danger, and seeking out and asking the government to regulate more control over our own lives for the name's sake and for the blessing and assurance of public safety or our individual health, who are our foot soldiers? The entirety of the nursing profession has been the foot soldiers through all this. They've always been the foot soldiers through Western medicine. But now they shine even brighter. Look in today and we cannot find any kind of commonality between us and our fellow American citizen. And instead, we are so focused on what divides us. We are so focused on having to arrive at that end agreement that one person is right and one is wrong, that one is entitled to and one is being violated of. This common duality of objection, whether it be left or right or wrong or black or white, gay or straight, whatever it is, find the dualistic opposite, and that will be an issue in our society. You can choose to stay your side. You can choose to sit there on your side of the fence and not budge and wait for these other viewpoints, wait for the conflicting or the objectifying notion to speak louder. You can wait for that, but are you going to get anywhere. Imagine this world. 2020 happened, all the same scares, reach out for the government, same responses. And when it came down to the front lines, when it came down to those people that were at the bedside, when it came down to the nurses that held the hands of so many patients dying alone without their family, so much tragedy, so much sadness. It was those nurses who held it together. Just imagine if our profession of nurses had responded similar to the way humanity is now. If we decided that it's against our civil liberty, it's not agreeing with our religion, it's against our culture, we don't believe in it. What if we decided that? If we always had that approach? If we treated you the same way that humanity treats each other? You wouldn't have had any comfort. You wouldn't have had the heart of Western medicine. You wouldn't have had the love and the care and the compassion that comes with the ethical care provided by nursing. What if we would have acted just like you? What if we would have just dug our heels in and said, you know what? No. I don't believe in vaccination or not vaccination, so I refuse to take care of them. And I actually did work with an attending of mine who, every time he had to take care of unvaccinated patients, bitched, complained, and moaned about how we were wasting resources and how he shouldn't have to waste his time caring for unvaccinated patients. Now that was all a very sensitive time for us, and so I say it with utmost forgiveness and empathy for all that were either providing care, being provided for, or caught up in the healthcare system during this very, very, traumatic time for humanity. How was the nursing staff? Everybody touts the nursing staff. Everyone wants to talk about how well they did. The nursing staff are the ones that connected you to your patients all alone in the room. The nursing staff was the only ones that went in the room. They clustered their care and they spent time and still spent time in the room with those patients, knowing that that interaction was pretty much the only human interaction that a patient isolated and sick with COVID would really get for the day. I honestly believe that's why so many people died during this time. It wasn't necessarily because of the disease process, but it was because of the toll that isolation and loneliness takes from someone. When you lose the will to live and you don't have a happy thought to carry you forward, your sickness exaggerates and you will decompensate much quicker. I've put it on you guys and kind of holding you responsible and accountable for your actions. Nurses themselves, we adhere to the American Nurses Association's Code of Ethics. Now, this is a code of ethical behavior that states and outlines the provisions in which we provide you the most optimum care. This includes setting aside our own personal beliefs. It includes setting aside our own religions. Our job as a nurse is to find out what your religion is. If there's any practices that you do in your community or society or culture that I can make possible for while you're in my care. It is not for me to fight you and refuse care to you. Say I don't agree with it. It is for me to put my own aside and to value yours as my patient, as the vulnerable person subject to harm and illness. I serve as an advocate, I serve as a protector, as a provider, and I serve as a warrior for health. And that means if I can set aside all of my beliefs and show up to every patient room and be that comforting voice that's needed, to be that presence that is absent, to be the family that was never there, that's irreplaceable. We were witness to it. Everyone wanted to tout how nurses were heroes. Well, it's time for us to be our own heroes. It's time for us as a nation to stand together as heroes, to embody a certain set of ethical values, to embody a set of American standards. Let's decide as a country that we don't accept this, and let's adhere to a higher standard of moral behavior. Now, this comes not only from the general humanity, like I said, to try to embody and act a little bit more like the nurse that cares for you, but I speak to my professional roles as well. With the amount of misinformation that has happened, the amount of research integrity that has been jeopardized, the amount of scientifically labeled literature is being used to advance the agenda of whichever sponsors got their hand in the cookie jar. We're seeing a lot of industry, corporation, pharmaceutical companies, a lot of different government and non-governmental partnerships, especially in the industry field when it comes to drug and medical sales device and the government-sponsored interventions. We don't have a free national healthcare system. Healthcare cost. Our insurance is usually employment provided, meaning those without jobs or our, outrageous fraction of entrepreneur younger generations aren't covered with insurance. They don't have a primary employer that is providing some kind of, insurance plans. So we have a country that is uninsured, uninformed, and honestly unprotected. Longer that the professionals of the community, meaning whether you are in research, whether you're in academics, you're a professor, you work at a university, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you are a teacher, you are a cop, you are a correctional officer, you are a psychologist, mental health, dentist, or even pharmacologist. It is time right now for us all to come together with a higher set of morals and standards to regulate and move forward with what is acceptable. We all have a choice right now. And as different information, as literature and evidence continues to be gathered around, the efficacy or safety of the Pfizer or Moderna inoculations from 2021 and beyond, other maybe non-transparent information begins to be shared with the general public, we're going to see how information transparency and professional integrity is going to be key to saving not only, the health of our nation, the life of you, the patient or the citizen, as well as the reputation of healthcare and professionals in general. Healthcare specifically, it was a very difficult place to be because in the immediate response, we had so many people that were claiming that the pandemic wasn't real, that science wasn't real, that this was all made up. And of course, us who are literally at the front lines of Vietnam, witnessing just crazy death and some of the most just unsafe and outrageous situations I've ever experienced in healthcare. For some to claim that it doesn't exist at all, I think we had kind of a oversensitized, overinflated response to the public, and that was just this die-hard science is real, information is real, research says this, the pandemic is real, and we fought so hard with just aligning with our profession and backing up, the integrity, the veracity, and the intention and purpose of what we do every day. So many people that get into healthcare, at least on the nursing aspect, who just wanted to make money. Now, today's day, it's kind of shifting a little bit, but in general, most people that get involved want to make a difference and they want to help people. And lo and behold, here we are in a healthcare system where the one agency is in place where providers can connect and help those citizens in need are also a place that government and regulatory, control is being exercised, and therefore the full rights of the patient, the public, the citizen are not being represented. Nursing professional, I go for benevolence. Benevolence is key. Our medical professionals, they have taken the Hippocrates Oath. The Hippocrates Oath, or Hypocrite's Oath, as it has been called by some, it really focuses on first do no harm, which this is supposed to be what our Western society is based off of, is this do no harm. However, we have tons of examples throughout history. Take the Tuskegee trials, any vaccination protocol. Ask Fauci how all that went during the 90s, early 2000s, how we had to come up with the IRB to begin with, ethical clinical trials and animal studies and just so forth. There was a certain degree of mistrust that has been kept in society, rightfully so. And honestly, as a healthcare profession, we are further jeopardizing that trust by not stepping up, not speaking more out about the literature that is available, not speaking out just as a healthcare leader and as a voice for the unspoken. There are so many different people being represented and so many different voices speaking out, but yet the voice that continues to speak for healthcare is one affiliated with government, one that has continuously shown to be financially persuaded to appropriate public health risks. The key, the direction, the purpose, the mission is benevolence. Benevolence, the concept, is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and I like to add, over the greatest amount of time. How can you have the best, biggest, longest, greatest impact? Not just do no harm, but how can you do good? Because in doing no harm, it becomes a little bit subjective. What one person may see as harm, another might see as good. Let's take physician-assisted suicide, for example. I've never been in that experience. I've never been in that situation, so I can't speak for it, but I can empathetically speak and say that I honor a elder's person's right, who's of sound body and sound mind, to either have the desire to live or not. That might be viewed as doing harm if someone was to give medications to help someone commit suicide. Take, for example, on the news, I heard about the Ontario man who was being committed of selling sodium nitrate online as an agent to suicidal teens and suicidal young adults who wanted to commit suicide but didn't have the means to do so. Therefore, he has maintained this practice selling these substances that are fatal when ingested inappropriately. Back to this benevolence. We have to all be fighting for benevolence. I don't see our governing bodies in healthcare fighting for it. I do not see these, let's say, publicly appointed organizations that are responsible for making our public health decisions, informing public policy, or serving on advisory boards when it comes down to reviewing safety and efficacy of publicly mandated vaccines. The financial corruption and kind of level of biasness that exists and is being fueled is just ridiculous. So I ask for everyone, I ask for scientists, let's have keener eyes. Let's take a look at the research. Epidemiology is a growing study right now that has a lot of eyeballs in it, but nobody is really the expert of it. And so I think that's what's kind of held maybe any voices from the medical or from the statistical or public health kind of avenue of claiming this expertise to what's going on, because we haven't really developed that yet in our professional role system. Now, as a doctorate prepared nurse, I took biostatistics, epidemiology, public health, and know how to appropriately appraise and rate data according to its strength and level of accuracy or usability that evidence may have in practice. Also as a DNP prepared nurse practitioner, I have the ability to not only take that evidence, but to take it a step further and to determine how it might be utilized in practice. So I know that there's a lot of different academic roles and different professions that are able to dip their toes in the epidemiological field and know how to adequately peer review studies and be aware of those biasness, different measures that may hinder the usability data available. So I ask all of our researchers, all of our research designers, our lab managers, our lab personnel, maintain your professional integrity. Okay, when you sign off on something, make sure that you're adding to science. Do not let financial obligations or predetermined affiliations change the integrity of the science that you are providing for the public. All right, we need keen eyes. Our academic, our university personnel, continue in your fighting for intellectual freedoms. Continue in your fighting against the university board for your voice and your right to information and intellectual transparency. However, do not pass any doctorate level students on to practice doctorate level if you are not instilling in them the highest ethical standards of research and research appraisal. Now, that also applies to our physicians. Our physicians, our medical personnel, you tout and love so much this research, literature-based practice. Please turn your professional eyes, keen them in on this data. Give more peer reviews. Let's pay attention and let's interpret it for the public. We need to be the intermediary thing. If we create an offset kind of independent review board for our own practices, clearly our governing bodies cannot be trusted to give us the most accurate information and the most accurately appraised evidence for patient care. We've seen that. We don't need to see it anymore. What we need is our health leaders that are going to step forward right now, voices that are going to be able to say that this is the research that we need. We need representatives of our profession, of the healthcare community. Because right now we are still advocating for our patients. Our patients are the community is the citizens, our patient is the citizen, patient care, citizen care, patient rights, human rights. Government has the Constitution. What does healthcare have? It's a really scary time right now. But it is even more scary if we look and approach it all as a million different individuals fighting and other different individuals. Stupid, silly, innate rights. When health, our existence, threat to cease to exist, let that be what connects us. Let that be the driving force behind humanity. Do you know that there's actually this phenomenon that happens during tragedy? For example, massive disasters or chaotic catastrophes that leave this widespread damage. There's a phenomenon where people join together. Now, this is despite race, despite political alliance, despite their economic status, social status, literacy status, language, color. Despite it all, in the faces of the most dire tragedies, humans link together and are resilient and strong. We've seen this phenomenon before and we understand it. But let me ask you this. Why do we have to wait until we're hit with that disaster? Why should we wait until everything crumbles in front of us to finally decide that we can join hands with our neighbor in the sake of our health and our existence as a human and set aside the differences that are holding us back from living at all right now? This is a question we all have to ask. Whether it comes from you in the community and how you respond to those that feel different than you, remember the nurse. How does the nurse respond to you? Nurses are pretty outspoken. I guarantee they feel different than you. But did they ever make you feel different? Now, of course, there are always exceptions to any rule, so I'm sure there will be the exception of you who are spouting off different bad experiences you've had with nurses, and rightfully so. But I think what it comes down to is health, the perseverance of our life on this planet as a species is what should connect us. It is what the government will use to control us. It is what we can use to connect. And it's what nurses as a profession have used to comfort. So I ask you, regardless of your role, regardless of your belief, have the compassion of a nurse. Have the ethical awareness of a nurse. And at least start treating humanity as the connection that it is. I want to leave you guys off with a quote from Franklin Roosevelt. In our seeking for economic and political progress, as a nation, we all go up, or else we all go down. Consider that, and consider ways that you can help for us all to move forward together. I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll see you next time on Communicate.